All right, can everyone hear me? We're going to go ahead and get started here. Wait for everyone to take their seat. All right, thank you for joining us. Welcome to the Agoura Hills Planning Commission meeting. Please silence all cell phones and other electronic devices. If you wish to speak on or submit a written comment, please complete a comment card for each item and please submit to the city clerk prior to the public comment portion of the item. I'm going to call this meeting to order. And I'm going to defer to Commissioner Reinhardt for the pledge.
Thank you. Please stand.
All right. Kimberly, do you mind taking us through the roll tonight?
Good evening. Commissioner Reinhardt,
Present.
Commissioner Sharon,
Present.
Commissioner Stein,
Present.
Vice Chair Roth,
Present.
Chair Anderson. Vice Chair Roth, let the record reflect that Chair Anderson is absent and you have a quorum.
And on that, Chair Anderson has submitted a request for an excused absence. Do I have a motion tonight and a second to approve her request?
Motion from Commissioner Reinhardt.
Second. Commissioner Sharon, seconds.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Kimberly, do you mind taking a roll call vote?
Commissioner Reinhardt,
Aye.
Commissioner Sharon,
Aye.
Commissioner Stein,
Aye.
Vice Chair Roth.
Aye.
Vice Chair Roth, you have approval 4-0.
Great, moving along. I'm going to move to approve tonight's agenda, or we're going to move to approve tonight's agenda. Will the maker of the motion and a second to approve the agenda please state your names?
Commissioner Stein moves to approve the agenda.
Commissioner Sharon, seconds.
Thank you. And I'll defer again to the city clerk.
Commissioner Reinhardt,
Aye.
Commissioner Sharon,
Aye.
Commissioner Stein,
Aye.
Vice Chair Roth.
Aye.
Vice Chair Roth, you have approval 4-0.
Thank you very much. So now we'll move on to public comments. This section is reserved for persons wishing to speak on items not listed on the agenda that are under the subject matter jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. I'll be very clear that these are items not on the agenda. If you have something to distribute to the Planning Commission, please do not approach the dais. Hand your item to our city clerk, and she will distribute on your behalf. Public testimony is limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and a speaker's time may not be transferred to another speaker. Persons addressing the Planning Commission shall not engage in disorderly conduct that disrupts or otherwise impedes the orderly conduct of the meeting. I will now defer to the city clerk. Do we have any public comments?
Thank you. No written public comments have been received and no speaker cards have been submitted.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to the consent calendar. This section is now reserved for persons wishing to speak on items on the consent calendar. I will now defer to the city clerk.
Thank you. No written comments have been received and no speaker cards have been submitted.
Thank you very much. Do any of my fellow commissioners have any questions tonight? Seeing none, I will now call for a motion and a second to adopt our consent calendar.
Commissioner Stein moves to approve the consent calendar.
Commissioner Reinhardt, seconds.
Thank you very much. And I will now again defer to our city clerk.
Commissioner Reinhardt,
Aye.
Commissioner Sharon,
Aye.
Commissioner Stein,
Aye.
Vice Chair Roth.
Aye.
Vice Chair Roth, you have approval 4-0.
Moving along. So tonight, our next item is to conduct a continued public hearing, previously from February 15th, 2024, to consider an application for a site plan architectural review permit, an oak tree permit, to construct a new commercial office building. I will now open the continued public hearing and defer to the Community Development Director, Denise Thomas, for the staff presentation.
Thank you, Vice Chair Roth. My name's Denise Thomas. I'm the Community Development Director here in the city of Agoura Hills. In February, we presented to you an item to construct a 2,500 square foot office building. At that hearing, you tabled the item to this date so that we may work with the applicant and try and address or resolve some of the feedback that we have received. The item they've We've worked with the applicant, they have made some changes, and this evening, Katrina Garcia is going to walk you through what has changed. We also have the Public Works Director here to address some of the traffic issues, and a member of our consulting firm that does traffic engineering in the city of Agoura Hills. With that, I will defer to Katrina Garcia for the staff presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise, and good evening, Commissioners. The item before you tonight, as mentioned, is a continued public hearing for a new office building located on Chesbrough Road. So tonight I'll cover the following topics: a brief background on the project and the previous Planning Commission meeting, the architectural changes that the applicant made. Then I'll turn it over to the city's Public Works Director, Jessica Forte, to discuss the traffic mitigation efforts, and then staff's recommendation. So on February 15th of this year, the Planning Commission held a public hearing for a proposal to build a 2,545 square foot office building on a 7,425 square foot lot on Chesbrough Road and Palo Quemado Canyon Road that had minor encroachments on an off-site oak tree. Staff recommended approval on the project based on a set of findings related to the site plan, architecture, and oak tree that covered consistency with the zoning ordinance, general plan, architectural guidelines, and general safety. During the meeting, there was discussion about the architectural design of the building not meeting Old Agoura's aesthetic. There was also concern about traffic collisions and speed. At the end of the meeting, the Planning Commission voted 3-2 to continue the public hearing to give staff time to conduct further analysis on the traffic concerns the Planning Commission had, and to give the applicant time to make changes to the architecture. Since the hearing, the Public Works Department and the city's traffic engineering consultant conducted additional studies while the applicant made changes to the architecture. It's important to note that the changes made by the applicant did not alter the floor area, footprint, setbacks, or height of the building, and the site plan, landscaping, and ground cover are also remain the same. So the side-by-side comparison of the original design on the right and the revised design on the left shows the west elevation with the additional wood treatments beneath the roof overhang on the soffits, on the walls, and on the ground floor. The driveway remains the same at 26 feet wide with a 4-foot wide pedestrian walkway. The ground cover at the driveway entrance will also remain the same scored concrete as originally proposed. The southeast elevation, which is a perspective looking north along the curvature of Palo Quemado Canyon Road, shows additional wood treatments on the soffits and portions of the wall on the second floor. The landscaping will remain the same drought-tolerant plantings as reviewed by the city's landscape consultant and approved by the LA County Fuel Modification Unit. The fence along the east elevation will also remain the same natural wooden split rail fence. The north elevation of the building, which is a perspective facing south from Dorothy Drive, shows a 2-story office building with wood cladding covering majority of the second floor. The height of the building and the setbacks also remain the same and are consistent with the development standards. With that, I'll turn it over to our city engineer.
Thank you, Katrina. Good evening, Honorable Planning Commissioners. Thank you for allowing me to be here to discuss the traffic concerns from your February 15th meeting. My understanding of the Commission's concerns were centered around turning movements, speed humps, and traffic impacts. In regards to turning restrictions, there were 2 specific movements that were discussed. A restriction of left turns leaving the project site, which the applicant has agreed to implement, and a restriction of the left turn into the site as you travel uphill in the southbound direction. The latter restriction is not advisable, as drivers may illegally do a U-turn at the intersection of Palo Quemado and Chesbrough to access the site, which would result in an unsafe condition at that intersection. Until they become aware of a detour route to use, in which case that detoured route would be traveling along Dorothy Road, making a left onto Lewis Road, making a left onto Agoura Road, and then making a left onto Chesbrough Road. That's a little bit cumbersome, but even more so, it would require a left turn at Agoura and Lewis that has a history of vehicle collisions, and we cannot advise that we detour traffic through that intersection to make a left onto Agoura Road at that location. The second concern centered around installing speed humps as an option. This project location is not a candidate for speed humps because it doesn't meet the City Council adopted speed hump policy, which is primarily due to the slope of the road. as well as its classification as a collector street. Finally, the Commission expressed a level of dissatisfaction regarding the project not having a more thorough traffic analysis. Due to the unique characteristics of the project location and the depth of the Planning Commission's concerns surrounding safety, staff agrees that further analysis was warranted in order to ensure the Commission was adequately provided information regarding the safety of the proposed driveway. This study was done at the expense of the city, as traffic impact analysis was not triggered by the project. Next slide, please. Staff's analysis centered around trip generation, line of sight, speed, and collision data. As a reference point, a project generally triggers traffic impact analysis when over 500 daily trips or 50 peak hour trips are expected. At 27 total trips and 4 a.m. and p.m. peak trips, it is well below those thresholds. I think it's also worthwhile to note that the project location has 8 parking spaces, so it's unlikely that changes in the business use would result in a significant change to those trip estimates over time. Regarding the line of sight, the sight distance minimums required, the design minimum between the driveway and the downhill northbound vehicles is 155 feet. The proposed project has 212 feet, which would allow a vehicle exiting the property to see all the way through the intersection at Palo Quemado and Chesborough Road. The design recommendation of 240 feet is geometrically not achievable, and therefore staff recommends the edgeline striping be installed to maximize the sight distance and agrees that the 212 feet is adequate as it exceeds the minimum sight distance requirements. Speed and volume data were also collected and analyzed. The 85th percentile speeds were 24 miles per hour in the downhill northbound direction and 27 miles per hour in the uphill southbound direction. 85% is typically used for roadway design, but this site actually highlights that even at the 95th percentile, vehicles in both directions are traveling at or very near the speed limit. The final analysis point was collision data. No collision data exists along this stretch of Chesborough Road over the past 12 years. At the intersection of Palo Quemado Canyon Road and Chesborough Road, there had been 5 accidents between 2012 and 2020 when the area was restriped in concert with the Palo Quemado Bridge. No accidents have occurred at that intersection since the striping improvements were put into place. Based on all of this study, our contract traffic engineers recommend edgeline striping on Chesborough and the restriction of left turn exiting the driveway are adequate design standards, and Matt Stewart, our traffic engineer, is here with me tonight to answer any traffic questions you may have after the presentation concludes. With that, I'll hand the presentation back over to Katrina Garcia.
Thank you, Jessica. So with that, staff recommends that the Planning Commission consider the revisions made by the applicant and the additional studies completed by the city for site plan architectural review permit case number SPR 2022-0020 and Oak Tree permit case number Oak-2022-0056, and direct staff to return at a regularly scheduled Planning Commission meeting with a resolution reflecting the decision of today's public hearing. I'd also like to make a note that there is a correction on the staff report of attachment 2. There is a missing page of the renderings. That concludes my presentation. If there are any questions, I'm available here to answer, and the applicants are available as well. Thank you.
Appreciate it. So we'll begin with commissioner questions of our staff. So Commissioner Stein, if you wouldn't mind, if you have any questions.
First, can everybody hear me? Okay. The first question I have is, I like the fact that you can't make a left turn, but what is going to prohibit anybody from leaving the site from making a left turn? Is it just going to be a sign that says no left turn? So it's going to be honor roll, kind of?
Yes, that is a typical design would be that the sign would be the only deterrent for making that left turn. You can't really control all the vehicular behavior, but generally people do follow that kind of signage.
Okay. And then I did read the traffic study. It was for one day. There were quite a lot of cars driving along that area, but it was over 24 hours. So I kind of looked at it from maybe 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., and there were quite a bit of traffic. I did drive by multiple different times to try to gauge traffic, and I saw that, but parking on the right side, I felt that anybody who was exiting from the property would be able to see traffic oncoming. So I feel that the traffic study was warranted, but it alleviated any of my concerns from that. I also want to, thank the staff for working with the applicant for coming up with a little bit more rustic look to the plans.
Very well. Commissioner Sharon?
Thank you so much, staff, for the presentation. Attachment 2, is that updated on our iPads?
No, it hasn't been updated yet.
Okay, is there a way that we can see it in order?
I can try and pull it up, but it'll take me a little while to pull it up.
Okay, I'd love to see the rendering. Unless, does the applicant have a rendering that we can be passed around? Or?
We can ask the applicant that when they do their presentation.
Okay, thank you. In regards to traffic, if we're putting a new driveway on that street, are we going to have any signage regarding parking along that street? Is that going to remain the same?
I'm going to defer that question to our city traffic engineer, Matt Stewart.
Hi, Commissioner Sharon. Hi, this is Matt Stewart, traffic engineer for the city. There would be parking restrictions on that northbound side of the street from the driveway all the way up to Palo Comado.
Okay. So just to be clear, there would be parking restrictions on the northbound, but that is going up the hill.
Correct.
Okay.
Northbound down the hill towards the freeway.
Oh, okay. So northbound is down towards, okay.
Correct.
Right. That's what I thought, but then he said up to Palo Comado, so I got confused. Okay. So then my follow-up is so the traffic study, it tells us, there's no concerns to be had. Now, if there is traffic collisions in the future, what is the mitigation process for that? What do we do, essentially?
So that's a great question. We deal with this throughout the city. Monthly, our city traffic engineers receive any reported collision data from our sheriff's office. I meet with the sheriff quarterly, and we review all of that data. And if the sheriff's report showed that it was due to some deficiency in the infrastructure, we bring that through to the Public Works Subcommittee and we make those modifications. Generally, or not generally, but many times it's a behavior issue that causes the collision, someone speeding, making an illegal U-turn, those sorts of things. So we try to design around limiting the opportunity to do something more wildly dangerous. So I hope that answers your question.
Can you give me examples of ways you've mitigated collisions throughout the city? Because I just don't know this stuff, and so I'd love to have an idea, because I just don't have that idea right now.
I'd say an example, the most successful example I've seen is on Conejo View near the high school. There was a Conejo View from Driver to Argos. It has kind of like a blind curve to it, and it had no center line striping. And we had, over the course of the 10-year study period of our local road safety plan, 3 overturned vehicles. There were speed humps on that road, but they were hitting those speed humps at high speeds around a curb and launching and flipping. Okay. So there were 3 flipped vehicles. We reviewed all of that accident data with our traffic engineer, and the recommendation, was to install a centerline stripe. And we did that, I believe it was in 2020, 21, 22. It was a few years ago. And we haven't had collision incidents along that segment of roadway since that time. So very successful implementation of traffic striping. Trying to think of some other more recent ones. We recently restriped We recently restriped Agoura Road to have no passing lanes to increase that to our current standard. It had previously had more passing pockets as you go kind of south of Chesborough Road, and so we've made a lot of that double stripe, no passing lanes, things like that, and you would be surprised how much success you see in striping projects like that.
Okay, thank you. I have another question, but it may be towards the applicant, so I can hold it. If it doesn't, I'll ask later. And
Sounds good. Commissioner Reinhardt?
I want to first thank staff for the, extensive reporting and for hearing all of the concerns we had during the last meeting. I really appreciate how thorough the report was and you working with the applicant. I did have a couple of questions regarding some of the updated renderings. So I don't know if that's more appropriate for after the applicant presentation. I can hold off on that. I think all of my questions were answered regarding traffic mitigation. I did have a question about the parking, but it sounds like it's been answered. So are there current parking restrictions headed, so you said north, are there any parking restrictions on the south side of the street currently?
I believe along a certain segment of the road, there are parking as restricted southbound going uphill.
Okay. Just, I'm just envisioning, some of the streets in other cities where there are, cars parked on both sides of the road, and we don't seem to have that issue. I've driven down that street several times, but I just wanted to make sure that that there wasn't a potential for that. So, okay. I think that's all I have for staff regarding traffic. Thank you.
Great. I'll just ask a few questions because my fellow commissioners asked a number of great traffic questions. First, though, having been, I think, the commissioner with the most questions about traffic in the initial hearing, I really do appreciate the time and effort on the analysis. I know it was at a cost to the city, and I know that the threshold for which a traffic analysis would be called for wasn't, initially there. So I appreciate that first and foremost. My questions are very limited on the traffic now, but one question is, going down the hill into that turn, is there any, possible signage, like a driveway signage or something like that could just create one more communication tool to a driver as they're continuing down the hill?
So staff considered a watch downhill speed sign in that location, but when the speed data came back that people are actually traveling under the speed limit in that direction, it didn't seem warranted. I think that to Commissioner Sharon's point, if we do see an increase in issues, and that whether it's vehicle accidents, or if we're just getting reports that it's not safe, we could analyze that again and go back out and take more. It's fairly inexpensive to do speed data. So if we were seeing issues there, we could always implement that in the future, and that would be under the purview of the Public Works Subcommittee and the City Council.
Great, appreciate that. And I'll probably ask this of the applicant here in a moment, but should the occupancy change over time to something that has a higher use, more travel in and out of the driveway, could we codify something in the resolution that would trigger that analysis versus like a word of mouth of, there's...
Denise Thomas, Community Development Director. When uses change and tenant improvements change, they go through a review at the staff level. So there's no need for you to put it in the resolution because that is the way that it works. If you come in and you want to change the use or a different user goes in, we have to do a review and an analysis of everything, the parking, whether or not the use is permissible. There are a lot of checks that are already built in to our system.
Great, and to be abundantly clear then, so they have mentioned in the past that it will be for their use. If that goes from their use to a barber shop, that would trigger that would cascade that process?
If the use changes, if today it's Morgan's office building
Yeah.
and tomorrow it's Denise's office building, there's very little change, right?
Yeah.
You have 8 spaces, the parking is done based on the design of the building. If it used to be Denise's office building and now we want to make it some other use, Bill's Barber Shop, we would have to first take a look and make sure that the code would allow the barber shop. Then we would take a look at the parking requirements for a barber shop to see whether or not they can be accommodated on site. If they can be accommodated, then we would look at all the other standards and we would move forward. If it can't be accommodated, then they wouldn't be allowed to have it. If it is a use that requires a conditional use permit, we would review it as part of the discretionary action when we bring the conditional use permit.
Okay, appreciate that. I still have concerns about the potential size of certain vehicles that can come in. Jessica and I had a great conversation about this earlier in the week, but can staff elaborate a little bit further? I know we had a discussion last time about waste management specifically, but emergency response came to mind. I still have concerns about UPS vehicles, Amazon vehicles, et cetera. So could we dive a little bit deeper into the configuration of the parking lot and the various uses that would come in and out that are not the tenants?
So I'll describe this at kind of a general level, and then if I don't kind of hit the points that you hope I do, let me know, and we'll have Matt kind of answer this. The parking lots are designed for, I believe, the typical like Amazon delivery truck to be able to get in and out, and they also go through a rigorous fire department review. And so, from the concern of safety, I believe that that's been addressed. Does that answer your question, or would you like to kind of jump deeper into that?
I think to a degree. As we discussed, I mean, obviously on the fire in there's they'll have the right of way and preferred access and everything. We still can't control all behavior though, so hopefully if and when inevitably a UPS or an Amazon delivery truck does potentially serve this, it's without harm to the traffic. I have 2 more distinct areas of questioning. First, on the architecture. I do appreciate you all working with the applicant to revise the external face of the building. One of the questions that I had last time, and maybe it wasn't as clear, is the roof and the roof line. So I know that we had up here discussed a comparison of the building right around the corner, which does have some straight lines and very flat roof areas, but it also does have pitches around the building. And so I did a dive into the architectural design standards for the city. With the Old Agoura overlay, the roof type here, I think probably satisfies, but in the office design standards, I believe there was some nod to having various pitch and whatnot to the roof line. So I was wondering if there had been any discussions of that nature with the applicant.
So this architecture is very distinct. I'd prefer if the applicant were to respond to that. Putting a roof pitch on a modern building like this might clash with the intention of the architecture, and so we did bring that to the architectural review panel last year. They reviewed the project and they made suggestions that would make the building more in line with the actual architectural style. The Old Agoura design guidelines in the architectural design standard handbook is specific to residential. So staff looked at the building standards in the architectural design guidelines, which discusses flat roofs, not having any distinct features on the building. So when we analyzed this project, according to the revision made by the applicant, they did include soffits or a finished soffit with the wood cladding on there.
And that would satisfy that requirement?
Correct.
Thank you. And then my last question is related to the facility next door. They provided a public comment. And so I just want to understand to what degree there has been conversations about mitigating some of the concerns from that business and the construction of the potential construction of the site.
So I know there's been conversations between the property owner next door with our applicant, and they can probably discuss what the mitigation is for construction that they are considering, and we can consider that during our discussion today.
Great, thank you. Before we move on, any other final questions for staff?
I have questions, but I want to hear the, I have more questions, but I want to hear the applicant's presentation if, because it may be for either one, so I may come back.
Okay, hearing no others, we will move over to the next part of our public hearing. Do any commissioners have any ex parte communications to disclose?
I drove the site and the area.
I also drove by the site and reviewed the area.
I wasn't at the original meeting, so I did watch the recording, I think 1.5 times to make sure I understood it. I have visited the site multiple times and I've met with staff.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Stein. I also have visited the site multiple times and driven around the community as well. Great. With that, we will move on. The public hearing is open, so I will now defer to the applicant. Oh, yes. And I spoke to staff. Sorry, I believe, I'm not sure if any other commissioners, if they would like to announce if they had conversations with staff as well. Please do.
Yes, sorry about that. I had a meeting with Jessica Forte about the traffic report. We went a little bit into detail about it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Great. As mentioned, the public hearing is now open. I will defer to the applicant. You and your representatives will have a total of 15 minutes for your presentation. Please adjust the microphone and watch for the red light on the podium. The city clerk will let you know when you have 1 minute remaining on your timer, and so that you can wrap up your comments. Appreciate you being back with us tonight.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for meeting us and hearing our project here today. I'm basically here to answer any questions that you guys may have. I think the presentation done by the planning department described everything that we've modified and the suggestions that we've taken from our last meeting. We also brought some board samples of what the stucco colors would look like, and also the wood paneling that I think are some of the questions that you guys might have. So I'm here to answer any of those questions.
Great. Well, again, thank you for being back with us. Before we move on to public comments, do any commissioners have questions of the applicant? Please feel free.
First of all, thank you for keep coming back and coming up with better designs to the building. Part of my concern is the adjacent property, the OG, dogs barking. I know that there's been conversations between the two of you how to mitigate during construction so it doesn't disrupt their business. However, I just want to be sure that you're aware that your quiet enjoyment is going to be affected too, because you'll be having dogs barking all day long, and will that have an impact on your business is the first question. Second, I wasn't 100% sure. What is your business that you're putting in here?
So we're a diverse real estate company. So we do property management, real estate sales, construction and development.
Okay, so in your mind, if you have clients ever come visit, you want to have a building that's representative of what you are presenting as a builder, property manager.
That's correct.
Okay. I may have a few other questions, but I want to go through my notes.
Commissioner Reinhardt?
Thank you for coming back, and I do appreciate all the listening that you did at the previous meeting, and working with staff. So it's nice to see that you really heard what the concerns were of the commission, and made changes. Are you, can you show off the samples?
Sure.
Or do we want to do that in a little bit? Is that, okay, yeah, let's see, I love samples. Let's see some samples.
I can talk a little bit about it as well.
Okay.
The finished smooth stucco is actually an embedded color, so it's not painted. So it's a smooth troweled.
Right.
So it's a smooth troweled Venetian Mesa Verde. So it's on the grayer, greener earth tones. And the wood siding is actually what's called a thermally treated. So this particular wood is baked, and all the sugars are extracted from the wood. So it can't be affected by termites. It doesn't expand and contract. So the life of the wood would be for many more years than a regular wood siding.
Do you happen to know what the lifespan is?
It really doesn't have a lifespan. So the worst thing that happens to it over many years is it grays, but if you sand it and oil it again, it revives back to its, to its original beauty.
Okay. I do like that it's warmer, it brings a warmer tone to, what was originally proposed.
And this is actually one of the darker tones, but there's some lighter tones that we can choose as well.
Okay. And my other question was, again, related to the your neighbor's business, and when the story poles were coming down, that was a concern with, disruption and construction, and I mean, no matter what ends up being developed in that space, ultimately there's going to be some sort of disruption. So can you talk about some of the, mitigation that you would take during construction to assuage the concerns of your neighbors?
Yeah, we've had a lot of communication. So we've had email communications, we've actually had phone conversations, and we plan to meet prior to the start of the construction. One of the things that we're going to mitigate is that we're not going to have any heavy equipment on the site. So it's going to be micro equipment and a lot of hand digging when we're on the floor, which I don't think is their main concern. I think their concern starts more once we get into the second floor, and the dogs are going to be able to visually see some of the staff working, or in the future when we occupy the space and the office space, and the dogs may see us. So some of the things that we've done is made most of the windows on that side non-operable. We do have some awnings to be able to ventilate the building naturally. But in addition to that, we've also said that we would do all the cutting on the furthest side of the building. We did both agree that there was going to be some disturbance for some of the portions of the work. So we also proposed to put a ventilated tarp on the scaffolding, which is a pretty common practice to prevent dust or debris coming over to the other side. So we did acknowledge that, the dogs may have a period of acclimation, and that we would do our best. Also, the morning hours, we try to start any heavy noises after around 8 o'clock. Stay within all of our working hours. All the parking, try to find off-site parking. So you make the staff drop off tools and walk a further distance so we don't have too many cars on site or things of that nature to disrupt their operations. And I think back to your question, Mr. Stein, is that, yes, it is, the dogs, they're barking all day, whether they see people or not. So it will be a little bit disruptive, and I think that's part of the reason why we decided to do minimized operable windows. Also, we're doing dual glazed windows, low E, all these, high architectural level windows, so we minimize a lot of the noise coming through. We're also going to do rigid insulation, so it's kind of more of a soundproofing, fireproofing insulation, which will basically, when everything is closed, will minimize any noise coming from the outside.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Stein, do you want to follow up with your questions or turn?
I'm fine right now, thank you.
Commissioner Sharon?
All right. Hi, good evening.
Hi, good evening. Good, thank you.
Good. So I had similar questions regarding DOG, and was wondering if anything can be put into the, what do we call them? The terms of the acknowledgements. So like make, what are they? Hold on, let me get the. conditions of approval, I'm sorry, thank you, in order to make sure that there are things in place, guardrails for the other businesses. I would hate to, see one business suffer for another business to succeed. So I was just wondering if there was like a way to, if we don't see some actions taken, just to like make sure that we're like hearing our neighbors and taking care of them. Is there something that we can do about that?
We have standard conditions of approval that deal with construction. We have construction noise standards, and we also have dust and debris standards.
Okay.
So if those standards are violated, it becomes a condition. You don't necessarily need to have it in the conditions of approval. You have a standard that says you must follow all the regulations.
Okay.
So if you violate that, say one of the business owners, maybe not this one, but a different one, has some concerns about dust and debris on their property, they would call us, they would submit a complaint, and then we would deal with it as a code enforcement issue. So the conditions, the standard conditions of approval will require them to comply with our standards. However, if you have other standards that you would like to consider amongst yourselves specifically for construction, you can deliberate on those, and if that's something you want to include and you agree as a group, you could add those.
Got it, okay. Got it, so, the applicant referred to like only using hand tools, and that they're committed to only using hand tools. Would that be something that we should put them into motion to make sure that that is upheld and it's, satisfied? Is that?
You could modify the conditions of approval to require them to use hand tools.
Okay, got it.
But what I heard was micro tools, right?
Well, we're going to use micro, so for the grading, there's minor grading, but for grading and excavating, instead of bringing a big, heavy-duty machine, we bring smaller, compact machines that are less noisy. And we're also limited on this site. It's a really small building, so it's the size of a home. So the foundation it does have some elements that are, a little bigger than a regular home, but we're required to do it in phases. So we're not going to be able to pour the entire foundation in one phase. We're going to do it in sections because of the type of foundation that it is. So a day of concrete is going to be a minimal day of concrete, 1 or 2 trucks. And the course of the construction, if we're lucky, we're going to be able to be finished within 6 months. We're estimating the furthest amount of time is 9. So yes, there will be a period of disturbance, but it will go by quicker than a larger, more scaled project.
Understood. Okay. Thank you for that. And then my biggest concern is really the architecture, and wondering if when it's a very modern building and it's in the Agoura overlay, or the old Agoura overlay, excuse me. And so I'm just really concerned that I know in the last meeting, mentioned the fact that a lot of the neighboring buildings have arches, and they have, they use stonework, and it's very reminiscent of old Agoura. And I love the wood paneling idea, but it still has those sharp edges. And so I was really concerned when I saw the renderings come back. And forgive me if I butcher the definitions, but like for me, it seems like the design was manipulated a little and improved to meet our satisfaction, but the architecture wasn't. And I say that because I feel like the building's the architecture and everything on the building is a design element. So I'm really concerned with the fact that it came back and it's basically the same shape in terms of architecture.
Right. I think there's a couple of answers to that question. One of them being that this site is so restricted that it basically what the density that we have is, and the location of the building is what we're yielded to. The amount of setbacks and the sizes of the driveway and things of that nature really limited us to basically having a small footprint and then the second floor with the overhang. In addition to that, answering to the flat roofs, we have very limited space for mechanical equipment. So most of our mechanical air conditionings and things of that nature, solar is on the roof. We don't have any other location for it because of the limited area of the lot. So we're kind of limited to also a flat roof. We did do a deep dive into the old Agoura overlay standards, and we're in substantial compliance with all of the standards. So coming back, and we've gone through this exercise, at least 4 times, and also with the Architectural Review Board. And every time we've tried to improve and take all the input that we can to try to implement to all these concerns. And in this round, without triggering having to basically redesign the whole building and start the whole process from scratch, also with the planning department, we try to do things that would give the more rustic, rural look of the building without really altering too much of the design of the building, because that could potentially take us back to starting the architectural process again with the board, basically kick us back 3 years, which is what this process has been for us.
Got it. Okay. Okay. I'm good.
Thank you very much. Before I begin, Commissioner Stein, looks like you've got a few more questions.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question. You were talking about the timeline. You said 6 months, let's make it 8. To me, probably grading and foundation is going to be, how long will that take? Because that'll be disruptive to the neighbor. And then how long will it take you to get to the exterior of the second floor? Because then all the work will be done on the interior.
Right.
I'm trying to get an idea of how much time you're really going to be disrupting the neighbor.
So we've tried to do a critical path timeline of this construction to try to get, we're shooting for those 6 months, but we estimate the groundwork to be about 6 to 8 weeks. And then the framing process, an additional 6 to 8 weeks. So by the 16th week, we're going to start, with some of the exterior process of the finishes. We also have probably another 8-week process of what's called rough-in, so all of our mechanical, electrical, plumbing, all the mechanical issues, the rough. So I would say, probably within the first 3-4 months, we're going to be in the rough framing, rough foundation stages, and then get to the aesthetics finish of the building.
Thank you.
Great, seeing no other questions. I want to thank you for coming back and working with our staff, working with us with our comments from the previous hearing, and taking to heart some of the feedback that we provided. I think all my fellow commissioners, for the most part, asked questions that I was going to ask of you. One of the things, obviously, that you've heard from me is that I have concerns about the traffic, but that's largely out of your control because you're entitled to a driveway to build the property, and that driveway does enter a road that I believe, there could be some substantial traffic incidents, but my concerns definitely feel at ease with the analysis, so I guess that's a double thank you. Really, just to hit home on the one question about the roof line, I did make a comment about that the last meeting. I do hear you about the mechanical need to have the AC, the potential solar, et cetera, but just want to hear one more time. Is there potential for consideration of making the harder lines less harsh? And if not, I'm just eager to hear your response, but yeah.
Well, I'd like to start by thanking you guys also, and also the community, because the truth is through this process, even though it's been extensive, expensive, it has improved the building. Like right now, we're happier with the look of the building than we've ever have been. I think going back at this point would be more of a hardship for us, and it would be a phase of considering not building this site any longer, to be honest with you. The amount of consultants that it's taken, having the help of the planning department, I don't see how we could have made it through this without their guidance. So they're exceptional at assisting us through this whole process. But to be honest with you, we're just fingers crossed praying that this is it, and that you guys, appreciate and and like the hard work that we put into trying to make this, good for the community, good for us. We're a small family business, so it's family members that are going to be working at this building, 5 people. We're going to be next to the neighbor, so we want to make sure that we're not affecting their business. They're a small business. Actually, my daughter's friend works for them. She's one of the caretakers for their dogs. So we want to make sure that we have harmony with our neighbors, harmony with the community, and also I think that the design of the building yields for a lot of the diverse, eclectic buildings in the area. I know that there are buildings that have sloped roofs, arched windows, and things of that nature, but you can also see just on that very street, very straight lines, large buildings, even buildings without windows like mechanic shops. There's 2 gas stations right less than a block away from us. So I believe that the design, the clear story windows from floor to ceiling, the colors, the earth tones, it's really going to be a benefit to the area rather than a detriment to a change in some of the eclectic architecture that we're proposing.
Appreciate that. Before I turn it over to public comments, do my fellow commissioners have any other follow-up questions?
Is that the color of the stucco or just the style of the stucco?
That's the color as well.
Okay, thank you.
Great. I will now, you may be seated. Thank you
Thank
for your time. I will now defer to our city clerk, Kimberly Rodriguez, for any public comments. If you have something to distribute to the Planning Commission, please hand it to our city clerk. Public testimony is limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and the speaker's time may not be transferred to another speaker. Kimberly?
Yes, written public comments were received by email on or before the 4 p.m. deadline today and forwarded to the Planning Commission prior to the meeting and will be part of the permanent record. We received written comments from Steve Hines with DOG Canine Resort and Spa, and also Daniel Farkash, Old Agoura Homeowners. And we do have 1 speaker card. Mr. Hines?
Hello, my name is Steve Hines. I'm one of the owners of DOG Doggy Daycare. Thank you for your time and thank you for your concerns of our business. Robert and I have spoken. Obviously, looking at the rendering, that's a building right on our property line. If you were to ask me if I wanted it there, of course I don't, but I don't want to stand in Robert's way. He has a right to build a building. He owns that property. Our biggest concern is, as I wrote in, is during construction. The story poles came down the other day and it was an eruption in our yard. It's hard to keep dogs calm when they see possibly an intruder or whatever they're thinking. It adds stress to our clients, and are they going to continue to come if they're stressed out every day? Again, I'm not trying to stop this at all. I'm trying to mitigate the effect it has during construction. Robert and I talked about screening. I'd like to understand that a little more, how much we can do. I know there are standards that are appropriate for the average build in an average neighborhood or an average, Old Agoura or wherever. This is not an average situation. It's building next to a daycare. It's doggies, yes, but picture children running around. Would it be the same standards? Maybe there should be a bit higher standard. And as Robert said, he's taken steps to not have big machinery in there. But as you can see where it sets, so our dog yards sit right there, just on that hill. As I said, the story poles are coming up. The dogs can see right up to that. So the most screening we can have, and I don't know if that's, as again, Robert and I talked, what the conditions are, as you asked. I don't know if we need to condition or at least have a conversation of what the city will allow, how high, how wide, to screen the visual as much as the debris or anything that could get into the dog yards. So I think you understand our concerns. I think Robert is willing to address them. I don't want his hands to be tied that he can't do an 8-foot or a 12-foot or a 20-foot screen if that's possible. If the city says or the standards say he can't build a screen above 4 feet, that doesn't really help us. So we would like as high and as big and as best screen that Robert is willing to put there. Obviously, cost is a concern, but the best he can do in that regard would be appreciated by us. The rest of it is up for you guys to decide. So I don't know if I stay for comments or questions from you or back to the applicant.
Well, we'll turn back to the applicant. Thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
Thank you. No further speaker cards.
Thank you. Awesome. I will now defer to the applicant for 5 minutes of rebuttal.
Ventilated tarp. So these ventilated tarps are usually installed during the scaffolding phase of the building. So as we're coming up with the building, we're also coming up with scaffolding on the side of the building, and the tarps are installed on the scaffolding. So whatever the height of the building is, the scaffolding will be that height, and the tarps will be placed from whatever the density of the building from point to point, from end to end, the tarps will be up during the entire time that we're working. So whatever the building height is, the tarps will be that height.
Great. If you have no other rebuttal.
I think there was a bit of a confusion with one of the questions of screening. I believe that it was interpreted as we were proposing or it was requested to build a fence that exceeded a 6-foot height limit. And I think that's where the discrepancy kind of came, where it was assumed that we were proposing a fence to screen the two lots or the two adjacent properties. And basically what we discussed was these tarps to prevent dust or debris, and also it's a visual impairment. So when these tarps are up, you won't really be able to see the activities on the construction side. There will be the noise still, so the dogs will still have some disturbance. But we're going to limit as much as we can the visual and the dust and debris.
Great, thank you. So before we close the public hearing, it seems like we've got a very a burning question here, but do any of my fellow commissioners have further questions for the applicant or staff?
So I just want to make sure I understand, because scaffolding I don't talk about scaffolding very often, but those are the, it's like the structure outside of a building, and crews work on them, and then they're on the crew is on the interior, the covering is on the exterior, so they shouldn't be seen, essentially, correct?
Correct. So the scaffolding are like stilts,
Yeah.
so we can work on the outside of the building, and as those stilts go up, we put tarps.
Okay. Is that understood? Okay. Can you please come to if you want to speak, you have to.
So you see the building, but on either side of that, not to the, we're looking, not to the right, but more to the left, if people are walking it, if there's activity and construction going on, from the day they're up there, as I said, it was just the story poles coming down and the dogs erupt because they see something they want to protect, and I guess you all know dogs. And one gets going, then they're all looking, and it becomes mayhem, our employee, anyways. So if we could have a screen from the time activity starts up there, blocking the visual and the debris and the rest from anywhere where the dogs would see up on that hill, if they're below our fence, or if there isn't a visual, then fine. But where it sits now, and I've walked up there, if you're 6 feet high, you can see down to the dogs. So what I'm hoping for is a screen of that activity across our fence line, because any activity seen by the dogs, they erupt.
Great, thank you. If the applicant wouldn't mind. So my question, sorry, before I continue myself. Commissioner Reinhardt, Commissioner Stein, any other further questions for staff or the applicant?
I'll leave this up to staff to decide whether or not this is even feasible, but even before you start construction, it sounds like what Dioge's saying is, could you put like 20-foot poles and then put the screening up before you even start construction so that no one is even being seen on your side of the property? I don't know if that's something that can be a condition to before construction starts.
I think for us physically, we're able to do it. I think it also would be to the discretion of the city how those poles would be constructed to create that screening.
Denise Thomas, Community Development Director. It is possible to condition him to do a construction plan which outlines what he is willing to do to mitigate for the sound. What we do not allow in the city are 20-foot tall screens to surround a building. We have never allowed that any place. And while it would arguably keep them from being visible, to just have it up for 9 months, as you can imagine, other residents who are not, who don't use DOG, who are in the community, will likely have some concerns. 1. 2, structurally, I don't know whether or not 20-foot tall poles with screens on them are safe. What I do know is that if you exceed a certain height on poles, they have to be structurally sound, they have to be able to maintain wind shear. There's a lot of engineering that goes behind it. I believe that what he's proposing with the scaffolding is wholly doable. As the scaffolding is needed, if he can screen the people on the inside, then that's possible. But I can't tell you whether or not our code or our building official will allow 20-foot tall poles with screens around 7,500 square foot of land. I just don't know the answer to that. That's the building official's answer.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up question. So if scaffolding is an acceptable, I guess, architectural element to this temporarily shielding, the building during construction, would it stand to reason then that is it like a 10 or 20-foot gap where that would be the back of the building, kind of that like apex of the triangle on the left, that we could have the applicant build scaffolding there with that would shield any workers that were working in kind of that free zone that isn't necessarily right in the footprint of the building?
I can answer that, Denise, a little bit if you want. Unfortunately, the scaffolding is structurally attached to the building that is structurally engineered. It is safe when there's a building there, but if we put up scaffolding without a building, then we don't have anything to anchor the scaffolding to. So that would be another, structural question or task that we would have to figure out how to achieve. What we can do, again, is first we're going to be working on the floor. So besides the noise that is, basically a natural standard of construction, we're going to limit that as much as we can. And I'm also going to share, the telephone numbers to our foreman. So if there is something that is in excess of noise, that we can have an open line of communication with our neighbor to make sure that they have a way to access me or our foreman on site, to make sure that for any particular reason we can communicate, hey, we need to figure something out with this and with that. And also, again, as we're start to erect the building, we're going to immediately need scaffolding. So as soon as we have the anchoring situation for the scaffolding, we'll put it up immediately. And it's also a construction standard for us. If somebody's cutting on the side of a building, we have to have those tarps because dust will go airborne. Debris could go airborne. So it's basically one of the construction standards that Denise was mentioning, that we're required to do that for our safety, for the neighbor's safety, whether it's a residential house next door with babies or dogs, or a daycare for dogs or kids. These are the standards that we have to abide by to make for building and safety.
Okay, thank you. And I appreciate that, both of you have had an open line of communication and that you're willing to work together, and that's the sign of a good neighborhood. And I appreciate that, you, the business owner, and you, the applicant, are willing to talk to each other and make certain concessions in order to achieve a positive outcome. Thank
Yeah, we have each other's telephone numbers, emails. We've talked on the phone a few times already. We've exchanged emails, and we want to make sure that, again, we want harmony. You don't want your neighbor to be mad at you. We're going to be there every single day. And as I mentioned before, I have pets as well, so they're like an extension of kids, and we wouldn't want our pets to be stressed out. And we would also like to use their services. So I think it's kind of, the whole economic circle for all of us is improving there, because we're going to render their services. Maybe they'll come to us for something that related to real estate. So we want to have the best relationship that we can with all of our neighbors.
Appreciate that. Any further questions? I will follow up real quick. Before you sit down, I've got one more question. Okay, so to be clear, right now, there will be, before scaffolding, before the grading, there's going to be a 6-foot fence along.
There's an existing 6-foot fence now. It's actually their fence.
Okay. And is there any, so if it's on their side of the property, if you can, is there possibility to have a 6-foot fence on the applicant's side of the property as well, which would then increase that vertical line significantly?
Denise Thomas, Community Development Director. The construction standards apply to him regardless of what other fencing and walls exist. He's still required to contain his construction debris, his construction noise. So even though the property owner adjacent to him has a fence, we would not accept him saying, well, my neighbor has a fence, I'm going to use their fence instead of my own. He has to have his own construction fencing. And the only time in the city when you're allowed to use the fabric over the chain link is during construction. So our code would require him to do a chain link fence with the fabric around it. So that will provide some protection visually from the activity that's going to be on the property. Does that answer your question?
I guess more pointedly, that's happening no matter what. That fence is coming.
Yes.
Going to be installed.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
That's correct.
My question, my follow-up to that then is, the height of that standard is 6 feet. Is that a maximum? Is that a minimum? Is there, without going to the 20-foot threshold, I think
The
that was
maximum
requested.
is 6 feet.
And
If he wants taller fencing, he has to ask for a variance for taller fencing, and you have to identify what the hardship is, and then you have to make findings. That's not the subject of tonight's hearing. He did not ask for a variance for that, and you wouldn't be able to consider a variance. And you don't have the authority to exceed what the code would allow. So you couldn't condition and say we want greater than 6 feet. 6 feet is what our standard is.
So would that would apply then to a 20-foot request anyways?
A 20-foot request, we would need to understand what the engineering would be. Just to give you a frame of reference, there's a golf course at the edge of town. That golf course has fencing and chains. I want to say they go up 30 or 35 feet. Imagine being on a hillside and going up that high. You start factoring into navigation easements. You don't know how the birds are migrating through there. There are a whole lot of other factors we have to look at when you come to us and you say, my elevation is 1,500 square feet or 1,500 foot elevation, and now I want to put a 20-foot tall fence on top of that. We now have to look at a whole lot more than if you do 6 feet. So our council has adopted a 6-foot standard citywide because that is always going to be okay.
That's a pretty general standard in other municipalities as well?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
If I could also add.
Please go for it.
The elevation of our neighbor is, I would say, and these are rough estimates, over 4 feet below us. And their existing fence is on our elevation height. So when you're standing on our side of the property, the fence is 6 feet. When you're on their side of the property, it's more like, I would say, 9, 10 feet, maybe even more, maybe even 11 feet. So their property is sunken in minimum 4 feet below us. So the visual aspect from their side, they're looking up at us, and we're looking down on them. But the fence is actually on our 6-foot threshold. Yeah.
So essentially what he's getting at is that from their vantage point, with the elevation differential, you will have 4 feet built in, and then on top of that 4 feet, you'll have a 6-foot fence. So you're going to get a 10-foot fence without it being structurally engineered.
Appreciate that. And then the scaffolding, based off of your rough timeline earlier, would be installed at about 16 to 20 weeks into the construction project?
It probably will be sooner than that, but yes, I would just say 16 weeks, but we're going to start during the framing. So after the eight week, when we're done with our foundation, and soon as we're starting to erect, we start bringing in scaffolding. So let's say more around the 10 to 12 week. So anytime we're going up with scaffolding as well.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Before we conclude, any other last commissioner questions or comments?
One more question regarding the timeline. Hypothetically, if you were building a single-story, single-family home, you would still have to do the grading, putting in the foundation, first floor framing. How long will that take before you go up to the second floor? I'm just trying to get a sense of.
It's very similar. This one's going to be a little bit more time consuming because of the type of foundation that we're required to build. But this is almost like a single family home. So the square footage, the structural elements besides the foundation are almost identical to a single family home.
I just want to thank you also for believing in Agoura Hills, buying a property that is a unique site and trying to figure out how to best develop it. So I appreciate everything you've been doing. Thank you.
Thank you. I love the area. I live here. My daughter goes to school here. I hike Chesebro. I mean, we've moved here because of these beautiful mountains and all the openness here. So I love the people here. So we want to really be a part of the community.
Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Final call. There being no other questions, I will now close the public hearing. We're going to now move on to deliberations. And before we do so, I just want to be very clear. If you are going to make a comment that approves the project, to state that you've made the findings. And in the inverse, if there's a denial, please clearly state which specific findings that cannot be made and the reasons why. With that, I will defer to Commissioner Stein to begin our deliberations. Thank you.
Okay. First of all, I looked at traffic that was brought up. I really think that has been somewhat mitigated. I am concerned, obviously, with the interruption with any kind of business that DOG has during construction. However, it's going to be 2-3 months. So I think, again, even if you were building a single-family home, the impact would be the same. It really comes down to design, the look. I really don't have a problem. I really do appreciate the enhancement of the color, adding the wood. I just think that looking at what's surrounding the area, and that to me is what I'm looking for, it does fit in. It is the most unique piece of property, and whatever you're going to put there, it's going to stand out. And if I drive by, I'm going to ask myself, am I happy to see that building there? And right now, I can say I would be happy to see that building there. And it comes down to, ultimately, it's really whether or not you believe that it's too or not enough rustic, so other than that, I can make all the findings.
Appreciate that. Commissioner Reinhardt.
Thank you. Just to kind of echo what we've talked about, I do appreciate all the work that you've done with the city staff and with the community at large, and listening to. I mean, we were at it for hours, a few months ago. Hours. It was a late night, and the fact that you listened to what we said, and is it a perfect project for anyone? It is not. But I think that a lot of the concessions that you made, and the fact that you are willing to work with your neighbors and make sure that you minimize the disruption to this gentleman's business, that indicates to me that you have a vested interest in this community. And when I think about anything that could go in that particular property, and that would be a different business. I can't think of a business that would be well suited to that space other than a small family business. And the fact that it's, mostly office work and that there will be minimal trips. I mean, all of us were concerned about the traffic. And the fact that we were able to come up with some, workable solutions with city staff on that, I feel like, the vast majority of concerns were addressed by you and by city staff, so I can make all the findings.
Great. Commissioner Sharon?
All right, thank you so much for just being so thorough and being willing to answer all of our questions repeatedly, for being in communication with your neighbor, and the staff. Thank you so much for the reports and the analysis and, doing what we asked, because I know it didn't trigger or require it. I still do have a deep concern for the traffic, but I rely on your expertise to give me the facts. As a resident, I think that putting a driveway in that turn is not safe, but your data tells me otherwise, and so I'm trusting the data. And I hope it's right, because it serves all of us to be correct, obviously. I have a huge concern with the architecture, and the concerns I had weren't necessarily met. And so, when I look at the resolution and I look at when I look at the resolution and I look at all the standards that were the findings that we are supposed to, make sure that we can align with and make sure that we can, make them. I just can't make all the findings. I can't, when I specifically look at section 6, paragraph 1, or section 1, the project is consistent with the Old Agoura Overlay District. The project achieves the intent of the policy's goals through the architecture and design. I don't have it that, I think the design, what you came back with design-wise, is great, but the architecture wasn't there for me. And when I look at the Old Agoura Overlay's purpose, the Old Agoura Overlay's purpose is to preserve the unique character of Old Agoura. The design guidelines for Old Agoura are intended to maintain a rustic character of the area. And when I look at the subsection of that area, no, not a subsection, the next section of Old Agoura, when I look at the required architecture styles and building materials, it says the project design and development shall perpetuate and reinforce the natural character of Old Agoura. And when I look at the commercial residential development standards, I look at, it says these standards are designed to promote the natural environment, which is country-like, while allowing architecture sensitivity to develop, which perpetuates Old Agoura's unique rural character. And I just don't see that in this design, in this architectural design. So I can't make all the findings today. And I was hoping to hear, I was hoping to see different renderings when we got the renderings, and I didn't see that. And then when I followed up with some questions today, what I heard is it took a long time to get to this point, and perhaps it was too much work to go back and make a bigger design change. And so, unfortunately, that's where I just can't make those findings tonight.
Sorry to interrupt. Just for clarification, you're saying you can't make a finding in section 6.1?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any others?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate that. I'll start with staff. I also, I think, will echo, and I've probably said this 3 times tonight, the safety of the traffic and the blind turn and everything was immediately when I drove the site the first time scared me, right? I made a comment about how I was being tailed by a BMW going much faster than I was, and but I do believe I did 1 full year of statistics. I believe in the statistical analysis. We have to lean on that, and I appreciate that because I do think, for the most part, it helped ease my anxiety and concerns about that driveway. To the applicant, I think that you have largely listened to the best of your ability to amend the site without having to go all the way back to square one, which is very costly to you. It's costly to our city. So I appreciate your endeavor here to try to make this as close to perfect and as you mentioned, a site that you're very proud of its final outcome. In terms of DOG, I also want to echo what Commissioner Reinhardt said, and it does seem like that there's hopefully trust here, and that to the extent that we can apply applicable laws, that wouldn't cause and jettison a whole other process of engineering that might not even be feasible. I do think that there's a lot to be said about the constant communication between both of you, and I hope that it's a long-lasting relationship if this proceeds. I can make all the findings on the architecture. I will start by saying that I hear you loud and clear. I think there is a site within 500 feet that conflict with almost everything that you laid out as well. And for that reason alone, I think I can make the findings because I do believe that we have a standard that has been set by that design standard of the other building. And I think, I see a lot of character in this that I prefer than the other building that is already in existence. So on that, I can make the findings. I would love to see a different roof personally, but I think it has been pointed out that there's gas stations, there are auto body shops with flat, very not pretty to look at cinder block front walls. There's old buildings throughout that part of the Old Agoura overlay that are dilapidated and in serious need of change. And so I think this has been a lot that has been vacant for a long time, ever since I've lived in this city, since 1992. And I think that it's something that will bring some character to a particular corner of the overlay district that does have gas stations and auto body shops. So with that, I can make the findings. I'm not sure if there's any other deliberations that we should have. Otherwise, I will ask for a motion for approval. And just to clarify, the staff recommendation is to consider the revisions made by the applicant and additional studies completed by the city site plan architectural review permit case number SPR 2022-0020 and Oak Tree permit case number Oak 2022-0056 and direct staff to return with a resolution based on the decision of the Planning Commission. So if I may, let me see if I got this. I will now call for a motion and a second to approve the staff recommendation. And I see Community Development Director, Denise, please.
Denise Thomas, Community Development Director. Would you consider changing the conditions of approval to require the applicant to provide a construction mitigation plan so that we can memorialize the things that he says that he's going to do to address the impacts to his neighbor?
Commissioner Sharon, I'll start with you.
Are you asking us to make a motion to this condition, to this resolution?
If it's your desire to memorialize the things that the applicant said they are willing to do to mitigate the impacts of their construction on the DOG business, the best way to do that is to require them to submit a plan prior to construction. And so that plan would identify all of the things that they are willing to do to mitigate the sound impacts and the disturbances to that business. And if you make it a condition of approval and it's violated, we not only have the city's code enforcement tools, we also have this entitlement to hold them accountable.
And if I approve, to amend the conditions of approval, and am still, and I am for that, but I can't make the findings for the whole resolution. So how would I agree to the whole, to the thing? That's just, I want to be very clear on what I'm agreeing to.
Yeah, so procedurally, what I think I'm hearing is we would move for approval of the staff recommendation with the added condition of a construction, I don't know, the verbiage
Entitlement?
we used, construction, a construction plan. So we would move that, second that, and take a vote on that. So if you're deciding to vote against the project, you wouldn't be voting in, confirming that motion. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, just want to be clear.
The reason why I think it's obvious why I asked you first, because that doesn't mean that you can't weigh in on that fact, even though the overall findings can't be met. So that's more my,
Got, understood, I appreciate that.
yeah.
So I do believe that we should do that. And do we need to set forth line by line what those conditions will be?
Yeah, you could either try to draft the language tonight or direct staff to come back with a resolution and that added condition, which would probably be preferable.
Yeah, probably. Okay, so.
I say let's go that route. Thank you.
So I will not make that motion since I'm not.
Of course, of course. And Denise, I want to thank you for actually raising this because I did intend on bringing this back up, so I appreciate it. Commissioner Stein, Commissioner Reinhardt.
Commissioner Reinhardt will make the motion to include a construction plan in the, I lost the last trail, sorry.
Sorry, so it's to approve the staff recommendation and include the added condition of a construction plan.
Okay,
And you can now say so moved.
so moved.
Commissioner Stein, seconds.
Great. So I believe then that's the total motion. Is that correct now?
That's right, so you can move on to deliberation, and then if you're ready, call for a vote.
Just because I've got the mic on, I will say, like I said, I appreciate it, Denise, for bringing this and raising this back up. I do believe it's the best we're going to get. I don't think we can deny construction on a private property. There are mitigations, and it sounds like the applicant would be agreeable and amenable to this, I hope. And yeah, I think it's the right move. If not, then I will defer to our city clerk for a roll call vote.
Commissioner Reinhardt,
Aye.
Commissioner Sharon,
Nay?
Commissioner Stein,
Aye.
Vice Chair Roth.
Aye.
Vice Chair Roth, you have approval 3-1.
Thank you, and I will now defer to our Community Development Director, Thomas.
Thank you, Vice Chair Roth. The decision of the Planning Commission shall be final within 15 days from the date of this decision unless an appeal has been filed to the City Council. Thank you.
And then just for the public, as a matter of procedure at this stage, the motion passes. It will come back to us as a new resolution on consent. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you very much. I want to thank the applicant for his time again tonight. So we'll now move on to our public hearing item number 3. Before we begin this item, I would like to defer to Commissioner Reinhardt.
Thank you, Chair Roth. I will be recusing myself from this item because it is within 750 feet of property that I have an interest in. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll hold on the item until the commissioner has left the chambers. Great. So our next item is to conduct a public hearing to, 1, approve a site plan architectural review permit to construct an addition to an existing single-family residence, and 2, to make a determination of exemption under the California Environmental Quality Act, commonly known as CEQA. I will now open the public hearing, and defer to Community Development Director Denise Thomas for staff presentation.
Thank you, Vice Chair Roth. My name's Denise Thomas. I'm the Community Development Director. The item that we're going to bring to you today is an addition to an existing single-family residential home. Robbie Nesevich? Oh, sorry, Katrina Garcia, our Associate Planner, is the project manager on this case, and she will be giving you a presentation. Afterward, we'll be available for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise, and good evening again, Commissioners. As mentioned, the item before you tonight is for an addition to a single-family residence. So tonight I'll cover the site and the surrounding area, the existing conditions, the proposed scope and the design of the addition, and then staff's recommendation. The project site is located in the single-family residential zoning district in the Lake Lindero neighborhood. Across the street from the project site are homes within the medium-density residential zoning district, and also across Lake Lindero Drive, behind the medium-density housing, is the Lake Lindero Golf Course. All the residences surrounding the subject lot are single-family residences, except that the medium-density residences are smaller lots with narrower setbacks. The existing lot is legally non-conforming to the zoning district at 6,930 square feet and below the 7,500 square foot minimum for the district. Since the property lines are not being altered, there are no impacts to the lot size, but may present other legal non-conforming conditions on the property, such as the setbacks, which I'll discuss in further detail on another slide. The existing residence is 2 stories and approximately 2,381 square feet with a 24% lot coverage. The existing residence is a typical tract home in the Lake Lindero neighborhood with floor plans and elevations that vary from house to house. Since the Lake Lindero neighborhood doesn't have an architectural review board, the elevations and designs of homes have changed over the years, resulting in various architectural designs. This residence has maintained the original layout and architecture with minor changes to the exterior facade. It currently has a first floor area of 1,082 square feet, an attached garage at 505 square feet, with a small covered porch. As was typical for the design of these homes when it was constructed, the second floor is sited on only one side of the residence, with a farther setback from the front lot line when compared to the front of the garage. The proposed project will add 199 square feet to the first floor to expand the family room and 655 square feet on the second floor for a new primary bedroom and bathroom. The existing front porch will be fully demoed and a new 144 square foot covered front porch will be added. The table provides a summary of the changes compared to what was existing. The first and second floor area will increase due to the additions and would increase the site coverage from 24% to 28%, which is still below the standard maximum of 50% prescribed for the zone. The overall height of the building will increase about 2 feet from 21 feet to 23 feet, but is still below the 35-foot maximum. The setbacks of the building to the property line measured from the closest point of the existing building are not changing. The 7-foot setback along the south side yard is 1 foot less than the current minimum of 8 feet, so the south side yard is legally non-conforming because the residence was built before the city had adopted development standards for this zone. The proposed addition on the second floor would maintain the non-conforming 7-foot side yard setback as allowed by the code. The site plan shows the existing building line in green. The 7-foot distance occurs at only one corner of the existing first floor and the proposed second floor addition. Although the addition on the first floor protrudes further from the existing building line, the addition will not encroach further into the non-conforming setback. The first floor addition would also push the new front porch closer to the front property line, but will still be set back further than the closest point at the garage, indicated with the 21-foot dimension on the site plan. As seen in the elevations, the left side of the building will remain the same height, but the addition on the right would increase the overall height to 23 feet. To minimize the mass of the building, the proposed additions on the first and second floor will be set further back than the existing building face for articulation and additional relief. The addition would also cause the removal of the existing chimney on the right side of the house to be removed. As a result of the addition, the applicant also proposes to modify the exterior finishes of the residence. The first floor will consist of white lap siding with a natural wood post and beam to support the roof of the front porch. The second floor will be white board and batten and contain a new window at the front elevation, 3 small windows on the side along the south elevation, and 1 small window at the rear elevation. The roof above the second floor will consist of black asphalt shingles, and the roofing material above the first floor will be standing seam metal. There are no changes proposed to the landscaping at this time, and the driveway access will remain the same. So staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve site plan architectural review case number SPR 2023-0041, subject to the conditions of approval and based on the findings of the attached draft resolution, and to make a determination of exemption pursuant to CEQA. This concludes staff's presentation. I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Katrina, do any commissioners have any questions of staff? Commissioner Stein?
None at this time.
I had a quick, sorry. Okay. I had a quick question. Is the chimney going to be put somewhere else or just removed completely?
I believe it's being removed completely, but I believe the applicant can also respond to that as well.
Okay, thanks. That was my only question.
It's not necessarily about this project, but like 6 doors up, there is another project that's going on. And it appears on the exterior to be a lot more robust than this application's. So I'm just wondering, like generally speaking, why the applicant tonight has to go before us, but the application or the construction a few houses up is not.
Sure. There's several reasons why this application was brought to the Planning Commission. That's because the size exceeded the threshold that would have subjected it to the director's review. And there are also non-conforming setbacks on the property, which they plan to continue, and that also requires Planning Commission approval.
Great, thank you. Any other, Commissioner Stein?
I did want to ask, did we receive any correspondence from any of the owners? There is the one property that I know is east of the property. It's got a higher elevation, and it would be looking down. Whether or not they've made any comments about their view may be blocked, but that'd be my only consideration.
Staff didn't receive any comments for this project.
Great, thank you. So the public hearing, before I move to that, do any commissioners have any ex parte communications to disclose?
Yes, Commissioner Sharon, I drove through the neighborhood. I saw the site, and as well, looked around the neighborhood and saw the other projects going on.
Commissioner Stein?
I also drove the neighborhood and looked at the property to see how it would be impacted, other properties, and kind of, looked an old tired home, and it needs to be, got a nice facelift to it.
I also did drive through the neighborhood and saw the proposed location and other projects in the immediate area. So the public hearing is open. I will now defer to the applicant. You and your representatives will have a total of 15 minutes should you need for your presentation. Are you the applicant? Okay, so please come on up, adjust the microphone and watch the red light on the podium, and the city clerk will let you know when you have 1 minute remaining on the timer, so you may wrap up your comments. Appreciate you being with us tonight.
Great. Thank you guys for having us. My name is Ryan. This is my wife, Brittany. We have 2 children, and we've lived in the home since 2017, and our family is getting bigger and older, and we're trying to adapt the home to work for us to be in the community for many years. Here to answer any questions that you guys have about the design. The question about the chimney that came up, we'll be removing the chimney completely and removing the fireplace.
Great, thank you. Before we move on to public comments, do any commissioners have questions of the applicant?
I don't have any questions. Okay. Thank you.
No questions.
Okay.
Very quickly, before I ask you to sit down, have you spoken with your neighbors?
Yeah, the neighbors, we're very friendly with our community, and we've talked about it. We've been waiting for a while to be able to be in front of you all to to get here. So they all know they've been waiting for us to do it and excited. So yeah, everyone seems okay with it and comfortable with it. We've discussed what our plan is. So
Great, and I'm sure if you've talked to them before, they know it was coming. They're like, we also want it done. So yeah. the timing here helps. Yeah. Great, I will now, you may sit down.
Great, thank you.
Refer to our city clerk to Call for any public comments. If you have something to distribute to the Planning Commission, please hand it to our city clerk. Public testimony is limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and a speaker's time may not be transferred to another speaker. Do we have any public comments tonight?
Thank you. We have not received any written public comments, nor do we have any speaker cards.
You are entitled to this, but you have 5 minutes to rebut, should you want. Great. Since there's been no rebuttal, before I close the public hearing, are there any other commissioner comments or questions of the applicant or staff? Great. Seeing none, I will now close the public hearing. We will now move on to deliberations. I will start with Commissioner Sharon tonight.
Good evening. Thanks for staying tight. I'm glad this is moving along very quickly. I could make all the findings. I would assume that if any of your neighbors had any issues, they would have written in, they would have come in. So it's great to see. When I was driving by, I was not driving with any of that, but when I was driving by, I did see the big sign posted on your lawn, and so the neighborhood did have notice. People always see signs in neighborhoods, so it's not like people ignore it. So that is really reassuring. The design looks great. It meets all the it doesn't change the the non-conforming parts are you're sticking to those exact lines, and so I have no issues with it. I couldn't find any issues in the report, and I can make all the findings.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Stein.
First of all, I always appreciate homeowners who are willing to spend a lot of money to improve their home and the neighborhood. I think it will increase the value of all the homes around it. I looked at the design. I found it to be very attractive in terms of what, dealing with the lot size. So everything looks good. I can make all the findings.
Appreciate it. Vice Chair Roth, I'll continue by saying thank you again. Thanks for being in coming to our city a few years ago and staying with us and making improvements to your home. I can also make all the findings, and I want to echo Commissioner Sharon's call out of the egregious public sign in your front lawn that alerted the community, your neighbors, that they could come and speak to us tonight if they had any objection. But I believe you both are truthful, and they're waiting for this to be done so that everyone's happy and on their merry way. So I can make all the findings, and great. So with sorry, this is my first time, by the way, being up here. Great. So the staff recommendation is to approve the site plan architectural review permit case number SPR 2023-0041, subject to conditions based on the findings of the draft resolution, and make a finding of exemption under the California Environmental Quality Act. On that, real quick, Travis, if we say we can make all the findings, that does include the CEQA portion of the staff recommendation?
So the motion would just be to approve the staff recommendation, and that includes the CEQA finding.
Great. In usual practice for our commission, do we have a maker for that motion? You can say so moved.
So moved. I will make a motion to approve staff recommendation.
Just say Commissioner Stein.
Commissioner Stein,
Thank
yes.
you.
Commissioner Sharon, seconds.
Appreciate that. I will now defer to our city clerk for a roll call vote.
Commissioner Sharon?
Aye.
Commissioner Stein?
Aye.
Vice Chair Roth?
Aye.
Vice Chair Roth, you have approval 3-0.
Thank you. I will now defer to our Community Development Director, Denise Thomas.
Denise Thomas, Community Development Director. The decision of the Planning Commission shall be final within 15 days from the date of this decision unless an appeal is filed with the City Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Before we invite Commissioner Reinhardt, do we want to take a 3 to 5 minute break? How do we feel about that? Because we do have 2 more items. Okay. As a process, Travis, what should I say?
Just formally call a recess.
Okay, great. We're going to just recess for a maximum of 5 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm not sure if we are good behind the scenes on the video, but we are going to return here. Are we good? Well, I'm looking for a thumb. I saw a thumbs up. Great. Great. We will continue tonight's meeting, and I would just like to note that Commissioner Reinhardt has rejoined us up here. Appreciate your departure.
I'm out of the ISO tank.
Yeah. Great. So our next item is to consider a resolution approving a conditional use permit and site plan architectural review to build a new single-family residence on a developed hillside lot, approving an oak tree permit to encroach into a protected zone of one oak tree, and make a finding of exemption, making a finding of exemption under the California CEQA, or California Environmental Quality Act, also known as CEQA. I will now open the public hearing and defer to Community Development Director Denise Thomas for our staff presentation.
Thank you, Vice Chair Roth. My name's Denise Thomas. I'm the Community Development Director. The item that we're going to bring to you today is a new single-family residence on an existing lot. We have a presentation for you this evening by Robbie Nesevic, our principal planner. And with that, I'll turn it over. We'll be available for questions you may have at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise, and good evening, commissioners. So as was already said, tonight I will be giving you an overview of a request for a conditional use permit, site plan and architectural review permit, and an oak tree permit to construct a new single-family home and encroach upon the protected zone of one oak tree. The property is located at 5810 Kolodny Drive in Old Agoura and is subject to the city's hillside standards since the slope of the site is greater than 10%. The zoning is residential very low density with Old Agoura and equestrian overlays. The project site is over 2 acres and is currently developed with a 904 square foot house in the center of the property, an equestrian area with a barn and stable on the northwest corner of the site, and a 654 square foot garage to the southeast of the existing residence. The property is accessed from Kolodny Drive on the west side of the site. The applicant is proposing a new 5,265 square foot home with a 429 square foot attached garage and 856 square feet of attached patios. The existing home will be converted to an accessory dwelling unit. Other improvements include a new pool, a fire department turnaround, a new septic system, and partial demolition of the existing garage. With the new additions, the project will result in a total floor area of 6,198 square feet for the lot after all applicable exemptions are applied, which is 37 square feet less than what is allowed. The project has an impermeable surface coverage of 21%, which is less than the allowable 25% impermeable surface coverage. On the screen is the proposed site plan, so you can visualize the project a little bit better. I have outlined the new house in red, as well as the proposed swimming pool. The red arrows on the upper left indicate the new fire department turnaround, and the green box on the existing garage represents the area that will be demolished. The project requires encroachment into the protected zone of oak tree number 4. The image on the screen attempts to clarify exactly what is being done within the protected zone of the oak tree. The light green circle represents the root zone of the oak tree, and the dark green circle represents the tree protection zone, which extends 5 feet further than the root zone. Outlined in red on the left side of the oak tree is the portion of the existing garage and barn that is proposed to be demolished. This would actually remove the portion of the structure that is within the protected zone of the oak tree, which in the long term would increase soil quality. On the top right side of the oak tree, as shown in the screen, the dark blue line represents a proposed storm drain, and the light blue line represents trenching that is required for the storm drain. As you can see, the trenching is proposed within the protected zone of the oak tree, but not within the root or canopy zone. Additionally, the oak tree is located on a slope and is at an elevation approximately 8 feet higher than the work being done. Because of this, it is not anticipated that the trenching will result in impacts to the tree's roots. The applicant's arborist will be required to be present on site during trenching to ensure that the tree is treated properly in the case that roots are discovered. And in this picture, you can see the existing barn and shed as well as the incline leading up to the tree. The Old Agoura Overlay District encourages new residential projects to embrace an eclectic rural style that preserves the equestrian nature of the neighborhood. The residence proposes a contemporary style of architecture with natural materials and rustic elements, including stone and wood, consistent with the eclectic style of the neighborhood, and all existing equestrian facilities are being maintained. On the screen is a rendering of what the residence will look like from the front. The proposed residence is one story and meets all applicable hillside height limits and the height limits of the underlying zoning district. These images show a view of the property from the street. The top shows the existing street view and the bottom interposes the proposed house in white so that you can see where the house will be on the property. As you can see, the new residence will likely not be very visible from Kolodny Drive due to the large trees at the front of the property, as well as the fact that the house would be set back roughly 255 feet from the street. The project is exempt pursuant to CEQA guidelines section 15303A because the project involves the construction of one single-family residence in a residential zone. While the property is partially within a sensitive ecological area, a biological report was provided as part of the application and no protected or special status species were observed on the site. For this reason, no exception to the above exemption applies as set forth in CEQA guidelines section 15300.2. Before I move forward to the recommendation, I do want to note that there's a small typo which was found in section 3 of the draft resolution, which errantly stated that tonight's public hearing was on June 20th, 2023. The draft resolution would need to be updated to reflect the correct date in section 3, which is June 20th, 2024. And with that, staff respectfully recommends that the Planning Commission approve conditional use permit case number CUP 2022-0010, site plan and architectural review case number SPR 2022-0017, and oak tree permit case number OAK 2022-0037, subject to the conditions of approval and based on the findings of the attached draft resolution. That concludes my presentation, and staff and the applicant are now available to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Robbie. I also find it difficult to know that we're in 2024, not 2023. I will now defer to my fellow commissioners for any questions of staff. I'll start on my right, Commissioner Sharon.
Thank you, Robbie. Great presentation. So a few things. I was really happy to see you explain the fire department access, because I didn't see that before, as well as space for them to turn around. Perfect. I love that. My follow-up to that is I have the Kolodny view, the street view of Kolodny, and I don't see any fire hydrants in front of the property. It could be to the left or right. I did site visit. We didn't mention that yet, but I did site visit. I didn't see one. I could have overlooked it. But because we're increasing density at that area, does it impact any fire regulations or anything like that that we need to be aware of?
I'm not aware of the particular fire department standard in terms of feet that a fire hydrant needs to be away from the property, but the fire department did review the plans and they approved the set of plans, which is where we actually got the fire department turnaround. Perhaps the applicant would be able to address those questions a little bit better.
Perfect. And then I don't know if this is a question for you or the applicant, but with the demolition of the barn, I guess the first part of my question will be for the applicant, but the second part is, my first question is, how will the barn be demolished? And then secondly, will there be an arborist on property during that demolition / is that required? Are they going to take that on? Answer the parts you can answer.
The answer is yes. So an arborist is required to be on site whenever there's work being conducted within the protected zone of the oak tree. So they would make sure, if anything needs to be cut, they're not proposing to cut any canopy as of now, but if anything for some reason unexpected happened, the arborist would be on site and tell them what would be required in terms of cutting to make sure that the tree stays healthy.
Understood. Thank you. And so within the protected zone, so they will also be there for the trenching.
That's correct, both.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Commissioner Reinhardt?
I think Robbie answered all of my questions. I like being able to see the overlay with the imprint of the tree, or the footprint of the tree. That helped out to assuage some of my concerns. Thank you.
Commissioner Stein?
First of all, I was very happy to see that in the environmental review that nothing was going to be impacted. I'm just curious, though, with the shed, was there any damage, or maybe that'd be the question to the applicant, that the tree is causing it already, that they're willing to demolish it? Because I know part of it is that they need to be able to add additional square feet, that they got to remove that structure. But I didn't know if there's any damage to that already.
Yeah, so the applicant can probably tell you a little bit better about their motivations behind removing it, or if there's any existing damage. Part of the reason was to get under that threshold of the required floor area ratio.
Commissioner Sharon, follow-up question?
From the photo of the shed, it looks like it's a movable, is it like a permanent structure, or is it a movable shed?
I'll have the applicant answer that. I'm not sure about the foundation, but as you can see, it's a pretty old shed, so I think a portion of it might have a foundation of it, and a portion of it might not.
Okay, thank you.
Great, seeing no other questions. Is the fire lane, so it was approved by the fire department, was it required?
Yes, so the fire department required it.
Great, and then on the oak tree in the trench for the sewer line, if they do come across roots during that process for the trenching, what happens then? I know there will be an arborist, but what would they have to do to mitigate any damage to the roots?
So again, it's not anticipated that far down, and it's actually outside of the root zone, and it's 8 feet under. So we really don't anticipate it. But if they were, then they would essentially, they've already submitted an oak tree permit, but there are conditions in the conditions of approval that say an arborist has to be on site, and the arborist will know how to cut the particular roots in order to not damage the tree and the tree's health.
Great, thank you very much. Any last questions of staff before we move on to ex parte? Great. Do any commissioners have any ex parte communications to disclose tonight?
Yes, I drove the neighborhood and just looked at this project site from my vehicle.
I also drove past the property.
I drove by the property in the area and then spoke with staff about the application.
I also did drive by the property as well. Great, so the public hearing is open. I will now defer to the applicant. You and your representatives will have a total of 15 minutes for your presentation. Please adjust the microphone. You may come up, so please adjust the microphone and watch for the red light on the podium. City Clerk will let you know when you have 1 minute remaining on the timer so that you may wrap up your comments. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Hi, good evening. Kevin Cohan with Elevated Entitlements. Grew up in Agoura Hills. My office is in Thousand Oaks. I want to thank staff for their time and effort to see this project through. Really here to answer any questions. We've reviewed the conditions of approval and our agreement with the conditions. Representing Anad and Lior, who are the homeowners of this site, who are also available. There was a comment regarding fire hydrants. There is a fire hydrant within 150 feet of the property, which was preliminarily reviewed by LA County Fire. The hammerhead turnaround was a condition that was mandated by LA County Fire. There was a comment regarding the barn demo. A portion of the barn will be demoed, so there will be a shoring of the wall that would help with the interior demo of the space. So our contractor Omri is here as well to answer any questions. In regards to the comment of the arborist, we do have a certified arborist who's prepared a tree report and will be available on the property during any trenching or encroachment of any trees. There's a comment regarding the shed. The shed is not damaged. It's an existing permanent shed with a foundation that will be removed. And again, we've applied also for an oak tree permit. So if there's any encroachment to the oak tree, that needs to be done in response to the sewer. This is gonna be on a septic, so it'll be a septic and leach field on the property. Those are all the comments that I heard tonight. If there's any others, I'm happy to answer any and will be available.
Great. Before we move on to any public comments, do commissioners have any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Sharon?
Hi.
Hey.
So the current house is on septic, and so you're gonna create a new septic system. You're not
Correct.
gonna, like manipulate the current septic system.
So we actually had to go through LA County Sanitation District Health Department, which took the longest actually throughout this process to verify the size of the new septic tank and where the leach field would be. So that has all been approved preliminary by LA County Health and Sanitation. And now it's been designed accordingly to fit for the main residence, new main residence.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You had mentioned with the barn does have a foundation. That foundation is going away. So hypothetically, what will be there after? I think Robbie touched on it. Is going to be permeable soil, which is going to increase the. Robbie, I forget how you phrased it, but it's going to make it
Increases the soil quality.
Oh, thank you, Robbie.
In the root zone of the tree.
There you go. So can you touch on that and what the process will look like in removing the foundation now that it's in the oak tree?
Yeah, if we can show that graphic, Robbie, that would be helpful. So this graphic here shows the shed and the demolition of the area in red, and then you see the canopy of the tree. So the removal of that shed will basically stop the encroachment of the building into the root system of the oak tree. So by removing that and providing a more permeable soil condition, will allow for better water flow, air, and help with the health and viability of the tree.
There's no concern from the arborist or the city or city staff not raising any concern about the demolition impacting the roots?
No, our consultant reviewed the oak tree report and signed off on it. They didn't have any concerns.
Yeah, and to comment on that, the oak tree, as part of the condition of approval, which we've agreed upon, oak tree arborist would be there on site to watch the demolition and make sure everything's done to code and compliance.
Appreciate it. Any other last minute questions?
I have one, but I don't, is the owner here?
Yes, and the owner and architect are available to speak. They've also left their public card for any public comments.
Because the only question you're going to be converting the existing home to an ADU.
Yes.
Are the plans to rent that out or use that just for guests? Because I know that part of the findings is that it was adding an additional unit to.
That's a good question. It would not be rented out. It would be used by guests, and they have a large family. So this would be their forever home. Their kids can grow up and eventually move into another space that's their own.
Thank you.
And thank you for that question, Commissioner Stein. I was going to ask it and I had forgotten. Great. I will now defer to our city clerk. You can
thank you
down for now. For any public comments, if you have something to distribute to the Planning Commission, I know that both owners, I believe, have submitted public comments, but I don't know if it's necessary for you all to come up at this point. But please hand any public comments over to our city clerk. Public testimony is limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and the speaker's time may not be transferred to another speaker.
Thank you. We have not received any written public comments. We do have one speaker card, Susan Carr.
I'm Susan Carr, and I live with my family directly next door to the site. So when you guys drove by the property and you looked in, we're on the corner of Kolodny and Balkan. So that's our arena, our house, and our horse paddocks. We're at 5826 Kolodny. We've been there since 2018. So we totally respect their right to build. We love the design. Looks beautiful. So our concern is about the 8 very large pepper trees along the property line between us being removed. That will take away right now what is a screen for the property. It also provides shade for our horse arena and our horses and our paddocks. I'm concerned really for the safety of those who interact with our 6 horses on the property while we're in their paddocks with them, or we're in our barn, or we're at our wash rack, or if we're riding in our arena. As you know, horses are prey animals. They have an extremely fast reaction time when they're scared, and they are on average about 1,000 pounds. So no question, our horses are going to be spooked, and there will be no screen without those 8 pepper trees when they're gone. These paddocks in our arena have been in place with the previous owner. We bought from the original owner, Joanne Calhoun. She was there since 1974. We are really happy your project is getting going. We know them along the process, and we just want to mitigate the impact on our horses, really by working together with Anat and Lior. We'd like to be kept informed during the construction process. We would hope that the heavy equipment will not be traveling down that what's now the fire road or the property line. I understand that there are fire requirements, no question, and we like that for safety. Is it possible to keep the 8 trees along the property line? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
No further speaker cards.
Great. After, let's see, here we are. I will now defer to the applicant for 5 minutes of total rebuttal. Please go ahead.
Great. Thank you, Susan, for those comments. And Susan's been a great neighbor that we've spoken to throughout this process with Anat and Lior, the homeowners. Definitely understand her concerns regarding privacy, health and safety with the horses. Unfortunately, these pepper trees are invasive plants and non-native to the area, and they have to be removed given the fire requirements by LA County. We are open to working with her on other types of vegetation that would be appropriate, native vegetation that would be appropriate with proper screening. So we're happy to work with her on something that can be implemented maybe during the landscape phase of the building permit issuance as a way to mitigate her concerns. But in regards to the trees, they do need to be removed to meet LA County fire, health, and safety requirements, but do understand her concerns, and we can look at other proper landscaping that may work there.
Great, thank you very much. Before we close the public hearing, do any commissioners have any further questions for the applicant or city staff? I suppose I will appreciate you coming and sharing your feedback tonight, and I appreciate also from the applicant perspective the being amenable to working through that process. As a point of kind of timeline with the removal of those pepper trees, I'm going to take you for your word, but I have city staff here to vouch. But is that something that can be done toward a later part of the construction process, or does that have to be done at the outset of the construction process? And you can answer this as well if you know the answer.
I will just say that, we can plan for it ahead of time. The only factor we would have to take into consideration is fuel modification. So the fire department will review any new trees that are within a certain perimeter of the building. So you don't need a permit really to plant. They're already getting a landscape plan approved, and we could definitely approve new trees so long as it doesn't impact that fire department road and it doesn't impact their fuel modification approval. So those are the two considerations for me. and MWILO, which is the Model Water Efficient Landscape Ordinance, which addresses water use for an entire landscape.
If you don't mind, just to comment that, in regards to Robbie's comment, the landscape plan will be further reviewed during the building permit issuance stage, so we can work with Robbie and staff and with our neighbors on a plan that's amenable. Regarding the pepper trees and the eucalyptus trees, they're highly flammable trees, so they feed to the high fire hazard, so that's why it's an issue to maintain them as well. But in regards to finding a native plant that will work there, we'll work at a later stage during the building permit issuance.
As part of the conditional use then, Travis, could we add this kind of discussion in a more codified way?
Do you mean adding an additional condition of approval?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be within your purview to do.
During deliberation?
Yeah.
Great. Any further questions?
I do have one, Robbie. So can they remove the trees at the end of construction so it won't be as disruptive during construction for the neighbor?
I wouldn't have a problem with that as long as they don't need that space for construction staging. They do have a current driveway that's going up, so I don't know what their current construction plans are, but if they didn't need that space for access or for staging, then I would say yes, we can prolong it.
Thanks, Commissioner Stein. Actually, that's a rephrase of my question, so I appreciate it.
No, I appreciate that comment. I think that's something that's definitely amenable to both parties. And for staging, there's a lot of room on the property for staging. The trees don't need to be removed right away. But of course, when LA County Fire does their inspection, that roadway needs to go through for the Hammerhead safety turnaround. So at that time, we can look at removing the trees.
And while you're still up here, I want to be clear because I might have a motion. The replacement of those trees with something that is conforming with standard, policy now for LA County Fire is acceptable and provides, I think, some potential, there will be some disruption throughout the process, obviously, but it seems like at the end, final outcome, it would be amenable to all parties. I just want to make sure that's amenable on your guys.
Yes, amenable to the applicant. I think that's a good solution to mitigate some of the concerns by the neighbor in the meantime, and then in a longer period of time for the future benefit of both property owners, we look at the right native landscaping and screening there that would be appropriate to the property.
Great, thank you. Let's see, I think.
I have a quick question. So were you suggesting putting conditions of approval, amending the conditions of approval in order to dictate their landscaping?
Can we hold off on that for 1 second until we get to deliberations? If there's.
Well, I don't want to close the public portion.
I mean, I would like to deliberate over it with it. But
Okay.
yeah, if you have a question for city staff or the applicant, I think.
Yeah, well, I want to know if you're asking for the homeowners to have a condition add into their condition of use, like that they need to put a different landscaping in.
Okay, I understand. Yes,
And then-
that was my question to Travis.
Okay, and can we do that? Can we actually say you must do this to your property, and it's just like a design out, just like to amend like other. I just don't. Do you see where I'm having a crux here?
Denise Thomas, Community Development Director. If I'm understanding your question, you're asking whether or not your conditions of approval can dictate what goes in the landscape plan. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I'm basically saying, like, if they don't want plants along that route, well, I mean, it sounds like the representative said that they would be willing to, like, work with them to put plants in, but if it's, like, not exactly the height of their current pepper trees, or it doesn't provide the exact same shade, can we really dictate what is put in, or if they even do put something in, based on the conditions of their permit?
Generally speaking, the Planning Commission doesn't approve the landscape plan and they don't dictate the landscape plan.
Right.
Largely because the landscape plan is more than just the plants that are used, it's the water budget
yeah.
associated with the plants that are used. The way that the landscape plan is generally approved is through the building permit process. So a preliminary plan is reviewed, and then at the building permit stage, the details are done, the irrigation is determined. If the property owner is willing to put in a tree, then that's fine, but it's usually not the Planning Commission who dictates what that landscaping would look like.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yes. So that's what I thought, and so I just sounded like there might have been some conflict between what you were suggesting and what you just told me. So I just wanted clarity in that.
So that said, you can add a condition of approval that's specific, but please be mindful that if it's difficult for them to meet the condition, then it could cause a problem down the road with the permit.
Yeah, that's what I'm also taking into consideration.
Yeah, I did also just want to add to that. If you take a look at the screen, there is a little bit of space between the property line and the fire access road. It may be semi-difficult to put in larger trees directly adjacent to the property line and the road. So we would certainly work with the applicant to come up with something that works with both parties. I would be weary of putting any very hyper-specific conditions requiring specific trees on next to that property line because it might not be amenable from a fire approval perspective.
Right. So that was my second question. Thank you, Robbie, for bringing that up and bringing the slide up. So if you're taking away the 8 peppercorn trees, is that because it needs it's encroaching on the space that the fire department is requiring as an access point?
That's correct.
Okay, that's what I figured as well. So so I don't know that I would necessarily want to put in a condition amend the conditions of approval based on that, and that's kind of where I was leaning in, like the thought process after you had said that. It does sound like they're willing to put in native plants. I think that would, landscaping is part of the home, building a home. So that's kind of where I was wanted to interject.
Appreciate that. Any other questions for staff or the applicant? Great. All right, seeing none, I believe I will now close the hearing. And now we can move on to deliberations. Commissioner Sharon, do you want to continue or should we pass it off? All right. Commissioner Stein?
Okay, first of all, I do appreciate the owners putting in a 5,200 square foot brand new home. I do understand privacy and all of that, but I also probably think that the fire department would have probably required pepper trees to have been removed. I've been told in my property to remove a tree because it's a fire hazard. So I understand that sometimes situations just are unwarranted and you just can't deal with it. I kind of look at the property. It is consistent with the plans. I believe we did get a letter from Old Agoura saying that they were very happy with the project. I mean, to me, that's probably the biggest consideration in my deliberations is, does it fit in with the neighborhood? And seeing a lot of different homes being built in that size and quality, I'm in favor of it, and I can make all the findings.
Commissioner Reinhardt?
As a former peppercorn tree owner, it's always unfortunate to see mature trees, have to be removed. But we know so much more about the ecological science behind invasive species, and it's unfortunate that there will be some loss of privacy on that side of your property line, but hopefully there'll be appropriate mitigation taken with native plants and trees. while also maintaining the, the fire code and the right-of-way for emergency vehicles. I think that the overall plan of the property is really beautiful, and it does fit in with the look and feel of Old Agoura. It's funny to think that the old house was 900 square feet. I think I've had hotel rooms that are bigger than that. So it's, it's really great to see kind of the care, for the, the entire, property area, and the fact that you're going to maintain the, the horse property and make sure that there's, that character that Old Agoura is known for, and that makes it so desirable. So I can make all the findings, and you won't miss the pepper trees, at least the limbs falling off and the shedding that comes from it. So I can make all the findings. Thank you.
Commissioner Sharon.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for entertaining all my comments and questions. As a Old Agoura resident, I can understand having a lot of peppercorn trees and eucalyptus trees on the property. And I also understand that we need to be as fire safe conscious as possible in the Old Agoura community. We have a lot of animals and a lot of people, and we just really, I love the addition of, I mean, it's an addition that the fire department put in, but I think that just, it brings a lot of, like, it brings down the concern that I had around the fire issues. And, I hope to God you never have to use it with a fire department. So that, given that it is required, there's not much to do, but it sounds that like you're willing to work with your neighbors and figure out a good solution, which is always great to hear, and really what our community is all about. I can make all the findings, and but I just want to add that I do love that it is Old Agoura, and it feels like Old Agoura, and it's going to bring the houses that are there. They need refreshes, and I love that you're not knocking down the old building, because it's still part of the Old Agoura culture. And like Commissioner Stein, getting that seal of approval from the homeowners association is also not easy. So it holds a lot of weight in our decisions. So I really appreciate the thought and the care, and even the presentation. So thank you so much. I can make all the findings.
Great, thank you. First, Commissioner Sharon, thank you for re-clarifying the question and getting more insight to the process there. I won't move forward with a motion for a condition like that, because from what I have heard, it sounds like the applicant is going to do their best faith effort to try to mitigate the potential concern for the horses there, and so I appreciate that, and I hope you stick to your word on that one. But I won't move forward with that. I want to thank staff as always, and the applicant, and you all coming out tonight. Later in the evening, I can make all the findings as well. And I agree, just as a general note, the biggest endorsement for Old Agoura is the HOA. So having that stamp of approval is significant. You sound like good neighbors. It sounds like you're moving or building a beautiful home next to really great neighbors too. So love to see that continue in our city everywhere. So I appreciate that. And with that, I will move for the staff recommendation. I'm going to say the staff recommendation, and then I'll call for a motion. So the staff recommendation is to approve a conditional use permit, case number CUP 2022-0010, site plan architectural review, SPR case number SPR 2022-0017, and oak tree permit case number Oak 2022-0037, subject to conditions based on the findings of the draft resolution, and making a finding of exemption under the California Environmental Quality Act, known as CEQA. I will now call for a motion and a second to approve the staff recommendation.
Commissioner Stein makes a motion to approve staff's recommendation.
Commissioner Sharon seconds.
Great. I will now defer to our city clerk for a roll call vote.
Commissioner Reinhardt,
Aye.
Commissioner Sharon,
Aye.
Commissioner Stein,
Aye.
Vice Chair Roth.
Aye.
Vice Chair Roth, you have approval 4-0.
Thank you. I will now defer to our Community Development Director, Denise Thomas.
Denise Thomas, Community Development Director. The decision of the Planning Commission is final within 15 days unless it's appealed to the City Council. Thank you.
Congrats. Thank you all for coming.
And thank you for staying.
All right, one last one, and then we'll call it tonight. Our next item is is a discussion to consider approving a resolution, one to approve a sign. I'm going to just hold for 1 second. If we don't mind moving into the lobby. Thank you very much. Our next item is a discussion to consider approving resolution to one, approve a sign permit that permits 3 wall-mounted signs for a commercial building located at 5025 Roadside Road, and 2, to make a finding of exemption under the California Environmental Quality Act known as CEQA. I will now defer to our Community Development Director, Denise Thomas, for the staff presentation.
Thank you, Denise Thomas, Community Development Director. The item that we're about to bring to you is a request to put signs on an existing building that is constructed in front of the Lifetime Fitness adjacent to Agoura Road. There is history that we will share with you, and then we'll be available to answer whatever questions you have at the end of the item. And I will turn it over to Katrina Garcia, who's the project manager on this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. The last and final item of the evening is for Mountain View Montessori School sign to be installed at a building on Roadside Road. So tonight, I'll be covering the site and vicinity, the existing conditions of the lot, and a brief history of the site, the proposed signs, and then staff's recommendation. So the building is located within an existing commercial development on the northwest corner of Agoura Road and Roadside Road. The site is zoned planned office manufacturing within the Freeway Corridor Overlay District, otherwise known as POM FC. The site is adjacent to the Courtyard Marriott Hotel to the west and a building materials yard on the east. The lot contains 2 buildings, which is identified as A and B on the vicinity map. Building B is a location of the proposed signs. So here's a zoomed in view of the lot, which contains Building A on the right side and Building B on the left side. Building A is occupied by LA Fitness and contains 2 illuminated building signs, one on the elevation facing the parking lot and the other facing the freeway. In 2016, the City Council approved the sign permit for LA Fitness and conditioned the future sign permit for Building B to go through the Planning Commission when a tenant had been selected. So at that time, no permit was approved for Building B. Building B was intended to be a multi-tenant building with retail and restaurant uses. However, the building underwent an administrative site plan review in 2022 to change the use to a child daycare facility, which included converting several parking spaces on the west side of the building into a playground. These are photos of the existing building. It's composed of natural and earth tone colors with articulated elevations and roof elements. It's also set below the street level, but separated by adequate landscaping and a fence. The proposed sign locations are shown on the site map of the building. The applicant proposes 3 signs as allowed by the code for tenants located on 2 street frontages. All 3 signs will be individual aluminum letters with a dark bronze background. The internal illumination of each letter will reflect off the background, casting a halo effect. The primary sign will be located on the south elevation facing Agoura Road, which contains a 98-foot linear frontage. The size of the sign will be 43 square feet, which is less than the 50 square feet allowed by the code. It'll be mounted below the roof overhang and above the awning on the stone veneer finish of the building. The image on the bottom right corner is a rendering of the evening appearance where the letter appears darker due to the halo lighting casting off the bronze background. The second sign is located on the other frontage along Roadside Road. The code allows the secondary public frontage sign to be half of the maximum of the primary. So the applicant proposes a 22 square foot sign with the same type of lettering and material as the primary. The sign will also be located below the roof overhang and above an awning on the building's stone veneer wall. The north elevation contains a third sign. The code also allows for a 10 square foot maximum size sign on a frontage facing the private right-of-way. Unlike the east and south elevation signs, this sign is being attached to a structural beam below the awning. The sign meets the 8-foot minimum head clearance with 12 feet above the finished floor. Since the beam is exposed, the raceway will be visible from behind the sign and the beam. To minimize the appearance of the raceway, it's proposed to be painted to match the green color of the beam it's being attached to. So staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve sign permit case number sign 2024-0087, subject to the conditions of approval and based on the findings of the attached draft resolution, and to make a finding of exemption under the California Environmental Quality Act. This concludes staff presentation. I'm available for questions, as are the applicants. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katrina. I'll defer to our commissioners for any questions of staff. Commissioner Stein?
Yes, I have a few questions. So one of the signs, I think, on Roadside Drive is 22 square feet is the size. So what will be the height of the letters? Because I'm trying to figure 22. I'm counting all the letters for Mountain View Montessori, so it seems that it'd be almost 20 feet long, so it probably only could be 1 foot high. I just want to make sure I'm getting an idea of what the height is versus the width.
Sure, let me just pull up the plans. I'll provide that answer. So the height of the letters would be 18 inches.
Thank you.
Any other commissioner questions of staff?
The only question I had was regarding the illumination. So with the LED, like backlighting with the halo, that's within that's like well within the parameters of our, light pollution and, the things we've done to kind of minimize lighting on Agoura Road.
So when the applicant installs the signage, it won't be final until 30 days after. That gives the director the ability to ask the applicant to reduce the illumination or to dim it further if it's too bright.
Okay, I saw the, I think is Kelvin, I think is the like night, whatever, and it just seemed like a high number. So I was just curious as to if there were specific numbers that were in place for illumination. Because I know that's.
So there's 3,500 Kelvin, which this project isn't actually subject to the new sign regulations that just came out, but it is within the allowable zone of the new regulations, is 3,500 Kelvin. Kelvin actually measures the temperature of the light, which is 3,500 is it's a less of a brightness, and it's more warm. It's a more warm light, whereby the lumens actually tell you how bright the sign is.
Thank you. It's been a while since I've been in photography class, so I appreciate the light lesson.
If I may add to that, if it helps, the lighting that is, if you're familiar with the shopping centers on Canaan, those shopping centers are about the Meadows Shopping Center, which is where Vons is. Those lights are 3,500 Kelvin.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Sharon?
I didn't have a question, but questions arise, more questions. So the sign will have a dimmability to it so that you will determine within 30 days after what to dim it or not dim it or whatever. Okay, great. Just wanted to know that. Okay.
I have no further questions, as all of them have been asked. So I think before we move on to public comment, are there any ex parte communications to disclose from our commission?
I've driven by the property, but I do have one more question of staff. So after 30 days, but do you periodically review if the lights go up or down over the next 3, 10 years? How is that illumination controlled from our perspective?
The city doesn't do proactive enforcement. So essentially what will happen, the lights will go up on the building, we'll have some experience with the lights, we'll measure the lights against the other lights around it to make sure that the lights are not too bright within that 30-day period. If they are too bright, we'll request them to bring the lighting down so that it is consistent with the other lights in the area. Over time, if, say, 3 or 4 years goes by and someone complains that the lights are too bright, then we'll take a reading, and if they're too bright, we'll address it as a code enforcement issue.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Heard about the ex parte. Any other commissioner ex parte?
I drove past the site as well.
I drove past the site and I go to the gym there sometimes.
I drove past the site, and I did want to disclose that my children attend a sister Montessori that is owned by this group, and I have received communications about the coming of this facility, but nothing related to the item tonight. So with that, I'm going to defer to our city clerk for public comment. I'm going to keep it fast because I can't imagine there's any public comment tonight.
We have not received any written comments or speaker cards.
Great, thank you. Moving along. Let's see. Okay. Are there any further questions from the commission? I know we do have the applicant here tonight, and we haven't heard from them. So if there's any questions for the applicant from our fellow commissioners, or any other questions of staff? Seeing none, thank you for being here this late into the evening. We will now move on to deliberations. So I will move to my left. Commissioner Reinhardt, do you?
I'll keep it brief because it is growing late. I think that this is pretty standard procedure, and my concerns about the brightness at night are suitably addressed, so I can make all the findings.
Thank you, Commissioner Stein.
I too was concerned about the brightness, but I've been assured that the director will take care of it within the 30 days, so I can make all the findings.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Sharon.
I just want to say that I like the design. I like the sans serif text. I think it's a beautiful sign, and I can make all the findings.
Thank you very much. I will. I thank you all for your questions because I didn't have to ask any. I would use an old John Ascension phrase, but he would always say that the best thing about chairing a meeting is when you have good fellow commissioners. You don't have to ask any questions at the end. I also want to thank you all for being here so late into the evening and just make a comment about this specific site, which has been unoccupied, I think, ever since it was constructed. So I'm very happy to see something go in. So with that, the staff recommendation is to approve the sign. Sorry, I can make all the findings. And the staff recommendation is to approve the sign, permit case number signed 2024-0087, based on the findings of the draft resolution, and make a finding of exemption under the California Environmental Quality Act. I will now call for a motion and a second to approve. To approve.
Commissioner Sharon makes the motion to approve the staff recommendation.
Commissioner Reinhardt seconds.
Thank you very much. I will now defer to our city clerk for a roll call vote.
Commissioner Reinhardt?
Aye.
Commissioner Sharon?
Aye.
Commissioner Stein?
Aye.
Vice Chair Roth?
Aye.
Vice Chair Roth, you have approval 4-0.
Great, thank you. I will now defer to our Community Development Director, Denise Thomas.
Thank you, Vice Chair Roth. The decision of the Planning Commission is final unless the decision is appealed to the City Council within 15 days. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great, moving on. We'll round this out very soon here. Are there any comments from staff?
I do have a comment. We just approved 4 projects. This is probably the largest agenda that you guys have all done together, and I just want to say good for you. You stuck through it, and you were able to get through, and I'm very proud of you.
Thank you very much for that. Are there any comments from our Planning Commission?
And we're done before 10.
I would just like to wish everyone here, anyone watching, the city, for a happy Pride Month. Me and Commissioner, Kate Anderson were at the raising of the flag, and it was really beautiful, and it was great to see our community come together for it. So I just wanted to wish everyone a happy Pride Month.
Any other comments?
None.
Thank you for that comment. I was unfortunately unable to make it, but it looked great and seemed like a lot of fun. But
As was I, and it looks great. So, and thank you to staff for staying late tonight and answering everyone's questions and taking care of us as always.
Great. We will move to adjournment. The next regular meeting of the Planning Commission is scheduled for the 4th of July, which has been canceled. The next regular Planning Commission meeting is scheduled for 6:30 p.m. on Thursday, July 18th, 2024, in the council chambers of the Civic Center located at 30001 Lady Face Court, Agoura Hills, California. The meeting is now adjourned.